You are listening to Stories at Audiobook Sleep, where your IQ will always be respected. Hope you enjoy listening to the story. The room is already dim, but you can see dust turning in the light, glittering like lost stars caught in the stale air of a forgotten office. It smells faintly of ink, old glue, and the weird sweetness of paper that has been stacked for decades. Somewhere a clock ticks, but not in a magical way. It's not a clock that tells you your destiny or summons a glass carriage. No, it's just an ordinary clock, and it's slightly offbeat, which feels vaguely insulting. You probably won't survive this, not because of dragons or curses, but because of sheer, crushing boredom in front of endless spreadsheets. You think magic will save you, but no. It's addition, subtraction, and balance columns. And if you can't handle it, you'll drown in numbers faster than you would in a swamp full of trolls. You discover this hard truth the day you meet your fairy godmother, if you can still call her that. Aunt Myrtle sits behind a desk stacked with ledgers thicker than phone books, and instead of a wand, she clutches a pencil sharpened to a deadly point. Her glasses are perched low on her nose, catching the lamplight like tiny shields. You expect sparkles, or at least a cloud of glitter, but the only glimmer comes from a brass stapler polished to a warrior shine. "Sit," she says, without looking up, flicking a page as if she's scolding the ink itself. You sink into a hard chair that wheezes under your weight. The desk between you and Myrtle feels less like wood and more like a fortress of paperwork, stacked high and leaning, as if daring you to sneeze and topple it all. "I thought," you began carefully, "that you were supposed to—" You waved your hand vaguely, as if that could summon fireworks or at least a puff of pink smoke. "Supposed to what?" She finally lifts her eyes, one brow arching like a bridge about to collapse. "Well, magic, fairy godmother stuff. Wands, gowns, making my enemies regret existing." Myrtle snorts, an inelegant sound that rattles her teacup. "Magic? Do you know what keeps this kingdom from collapsing in on itself like a soggy tart? Not glass slippers, not pumpkins on wheels. Numbers, balance, receipts. That's what." She taps the ledger with her pencil, the sound sharper than any spell. You stare at the open book in front of her. The handwriting is neat but endless, column after column of tiny numbers. Your brain slides over them like oil on glass. Myrtle notices your discomfort and allows herself a small, victorious smirk. "You telling me," you say, dragging the words out, "that you are not a wizard? You're an accountant?" "Exactly," she replies, with the pride of someone revealing they've slain a dragon with nothing but compound interest. The walls of the office close in on you, or maybe it's just the filing cabinets lining them like sentries. Each cabinet is dented, labels peeling, drawers slightly ajar as if they're breathing. One rattles quietly. You decide not to ask. Myrtle gestures to the dusty ledger in front of you. "This," she says, "is your future. Not a tiara, not a palace ball, a ledger. Look closely." You lean over. The numbers blur, but then something strange happens. A shimmer passes through the ink. Just for a moment, the digits pulse like they're alive, tiny constellations shifting in a paper sky. "You did that?" you start. Myrtle nods, tapping her pencil again. Numbers don't lie, but sometimes they do whisper. If you listen carefully, they'll tell you secrets even kings don't want you to know. You shift uncomfortably in the squeaky chair. This is not how you imagine meeting a fairy godmother. You thought you'd be handed a gown or a sword, not a calculator. "Why me?" you ask finally. "Because," Myrtle says, lowering her voice, "you're the only one in this family who still thinks numbers are boring. And boring is safe, until it isn't." You glance back at the rattling cabinet. The whispering seems louder now, like paper sighing in frustration. A chill runs down your arms. "Safe," you echo. though it doesn't feel safe at all. Myrtle leans forward, glasses glinting. This ledger belonged to someone who didn't survive their boredom. Look carefully at the margins. You do. And there it is, faint but visible, notes scrawled in a different hand, curling letters that don't belong in neat columns. Names, places, a number circled so many times the paper is nearly worn through. What does it mean? You whisper. Myrtle sighs, snapping the ledger shut. The sound like a guillotine. It means, she says, you're going to learn accounting the hard way. And trust me, that's far more dangerous than spells. The cabinet rattles again, louder this time, as if something inside is trying to get out. Myrtle don't even flinch. She just sips her tea, pencil tapping, waiting for you to decide if you're ready to face numbers that whisper like ghosts.
The cabinet rattles once more, sharp enough to make the handles jangle like a warning bell. You press your palms flat on your knees, trying not to look as nervous as you feel. Aunt Myrtle stands slowly, creaking like the chair itself has drained her bones, and she nods toward the filing cabinet in the corner. "Bring it here," she says. "Bring what here?" you ask, though the answer is painfully obvious. "The drawer," she replies, as if that's the most normal request in the world. You shuffle toward the cabinet. The air grows colder the closer you get, like stepping into a cellar. The drawer Myrtle pointed at, the one marked Receipts, Misc, is vibrating, thumping softly against the metal frame. You hesitate, then grip the handle. The drawer slides out with a groan that sounds less mechanical and more alive. Inside, piles of receipts, yellowed and curled, stacked and layered like fallen leaves. The edges flutter, though there's no draft, and you swear you hear a faint whispering, 1,000 voices muttering at once. The sound prickles your scalp. "They talk," you murmur. "Of course they talk," Myrtle answers briskly, returning to her desk as though nothing about this is unusual. "Every transaction has a voice. Most people just don't bother to listen." You lift a handful. The ink glimmers faintly, letters wobbling and reforming, shifting from mundane items, flour, candles, boots, into words that read more like confessions. Stolen coin hidden beneath hearthstone, paid to silence witness, one goat, questionable condition. You drop them back into the drawer, heart racing. These are people's secrets." Myrtle nods without sympathy. "Receipts never lie. That's why we keep them." You drag the drawer toward her desk, struggling under its weight. It clunks onto the floor, shaking loose a drift of paper that flutters into the air. One lands squarely on your lap. You glance down and freeze. It's a receipt for a ball gown. Nothing sinister, just fabric and stitching charges. Yet scribbled in the margin is a phrase that makes your throat tighten. "The crown owes me interest." "What does this mean?" you ask. Myrtle peers over her glasses. "It means debts are everywhere, tucked in hymns and hidden in bread loaves. It also means," she adds, lowering her voice, "that some people know more about the royal finances than they should." You stare at the receipt. The handwriting feels alive, like it could shift again if you blink. You tuck it carefully back into the stack before your nerves fray further. Why keep these in a cabinet? Why not burn them or lock them in a vault? Myrtle chuckles. "You think a vault can hold a kingdom's guilt? No, darling. You file it alphabetically." You laugh nervously, unsure if she's joking. Probably not. She waves you closer. "Sit. Now that you've heard them, you can't unhear. That's the beginning of the work." You perch on the edge of the chair, the pile of receipts between you. They hiss and murmur, phrases rising like steam. One complains about unpaid rent, another warns of missing grain shipments, a third sighs a name over and over like a lover. "This is horrifying." "It's accounting," Myrtle corrects. She takes one paper delicately between her fingers. People think magic is about glamour and explosions. It isn't. It's about knowing where the coins fall and making sure they land in the right columns. She smooths the receipt flat, and you notice the ink shimmer briefly again, glowing faintly green before fading. "Do you enchant them?" you ask. "No, the numbers enchant themselves. It's the nature of currency. Every coin carries its story. Stack enough of them, and the stories leak out." The thought unsettles you more than curses ever could. At least a curse you can point to. Numbers feel endless, slippery, impossible to fight. You lean back, trying to escape the whispers curling around your ears. Myrtle doesn't notice, or pretends not to. She pucks another paper, scans it, makes a note in the margin, and tucks it into a different folder. Efficient, precise, almost gentle, the way a surgeon might treat a dangerous wound. You clear your throat. And what happens if someone loses a receipt? Myrtle's gaze sharpens. Then they lose their truth, which usually means they pay double. The whispers spike, sharp and quick, as if agreeing. You shudder. A loud slam interrupts the moment. Another cabinet drawer, flying open on its own. Receipts tumble out, scattering across the floor like panicked birds. Myrtle mutters something under her breath that sounds suspiciously like a curse word, and you scramble to pick them up. Each slip burns faintly against your skin, words shifting faster than you can read. One, though, catches your attention. It's newer, not yet yellowed, written in bold, steady script. Withdrawal, treasury vault, amount excessive. The ink drips like blood. "Myrtle," you whisper, holding it out. She takes one look, and her lips press into a thin line. "Put that away, now." "But now." You shove it back into the pile, though the paper resists, clinging to your fingers like it doesn't want to be silenced. Myrtle locks the folder with a snap and shoves it deep into the drawer. "Not every receipt belongs to us," she says, voice low. "And some are better left unbalanced until the right time." The way she says it makes you think of debts that aren't just financial, debts that could eat kingdoms whole. The cabinets groan, then fall silent, as if satisfied. The room grows warmer again. Myrtle resumes her seat, pencil tapping. "Lesson 1, she says briskly. "Receipts whisper, but you don't let them boss you around. You sort, you file, and you keep breathing." You nod, though you're not sure if you can. The voices still curl in your ears, muttering about debts unpaid and secrets buried. And somewhere inside, you realize this office isn't just about numbers. It's a graveyard, and every receipt is a ghost.
The ghosts of receipts still echo in your ears as Aunt Myrtle flips open another ledger. Her hands move with a ritualistic precision, thumb smoothing the spine, fingers spreading the pages flat, pencil ready like a dagger. You sit stiffly, eyeing the cabinets as though they might open again. "Forget wands," Myrtle says, breaking the silence. "Forget fireballs and midnight transformations. Balance sheets are what keep kingdoms from collapsing." You blink. "That's not very inspiring." She leans back in her chair, glasses catching the lamplight. "You think fairy dust paid for the royal road between here and the coast? You think some enchanted pumpkin covered the grain shortages during last winter's frost. No, it was numbers, calculations. Somebody, me, saw where the money was leaking and patched it before the whole thing fell apart. You frown. But magic! Magic is a distraction. People love shiny sparks. Meanwhile, the real power is hidden in the margins, interest rates, loan agreements, land taxes. That's where kingdoms are won or lost. The words feel heavier than her tone suggests. You glance at the open page before you, neat rows of figures. At first, it's nothing but digits, boring and lifeless. Then, almost reluctantly, they start to shift in your perception. You see patterns forming, like constellations across the night sky. Debts spiraling, revenues rising like waves, columns lining up like soldiers. Myrtle notices you staring. See it yet? I think so, you admit. It's like the numbers are alive. They are alive. They breed with every transaction. They grow, they shrink, they devour if you don't respect them. That's why I chose numbers over spells. At least numbers don't lie. They might whisper, but they don't lie. The thought sits uneasily in your chest. You can't shake the memory of the dripping ink on that treasury receipt. That looked a lot like a lie to you. Myrtle flips to a different section, running her finger down a column. This here is grain distribution. Every sack weighed, every cart accounted for. Looks dull, doesn't it? But if this column doesn't balance, people starve. And when people starve, revolts happen. Revolts burn kingdoms. Her pencil taps a neat tootle at the bottom of the page. So yes, while some fool is out waving a wand at glass slippers, I'm here making sure no one riots because they can't afford bread. Tell me, who do you think matters more? You shift in your chair, caught between admiration and dread. She's right, of course. Numbers might not glitter, but they do grind kingdoms into dust when mishandled. Why tell me all this, you ask? Because you're part of this family, and because... She closes the ledger with a thump, folding her hands on top of it. Because you need to understand the difference between fantasy and survival. Fairy tales don't keep the lights on. The lamplight flickers as if it wants to argue. Myrtle leans forward. What's the first thing you'd wish for if I were a magical godmother? Be honest. You hesitate. A castle? Overvalued asset. Crumbles without constant upkeep. Next. A carriage. Depreciates the second it rolls out of the stable. Next. A dragon. Insurance nightmare. Next. You pause. Money? Her smile twists. Finally. But money isn't magic either. Money is math. And math, she taps her pencil against the ledger again, each click like a drumbeat, is the only language power understands. The words echo in the room, sinking deeper than you expect. She slides the ledger toward you. Go on, read the first page aloud. You squint at the figures, lips stumbling over the neat columns. 15 sacks grain, 3 barrels ale, 5 silver deducted for cart repair. Good. Now add the totals. You fumble with the sums, your fingers twitching like they'd rather hold a sword than a pencil. But slowly, shakily, you reach the number Myrtle has written in the margin. It matches. Relief floods you. You did it, she says softly, though her tone is closer to a trainer congratulating a dog for fetching the right stick. I guess math isn't that bad, you admit. Don't get smug. This is beginner's work. Soon you'll see how thin the line is between solvency and ruin. She flips to another page where the figures twist more intricately, arrows connecting columns, percentages scribbled in red. This is where the real danger lies. Ratios, forecasts. If you read them wrong, you doom thousands. The weight of her words settles on your shoulders. You thought you'd be learning about charms and curses, not quarterly forecasts. Yet here you are, caught in the quiet terror of numbers that can topple kings. Myrtle leans back, sipping her tea with infuriating calm. Still think you'd rather have a wand? You glance at the whispering cabinets, at the ledger glowing faintly under lamplight. No, a wand might be safer, but Myrtle doesn't give you the choice. You're in it now, and you'll stay until you learn why numbers over wands decide everything. The receipts rustle faintly, as if agreeing. The lamplight has burned lower by the time Myrtle drags a fresh ledger from beneath the fortress of papers. Its leather binding is cracked, corners gnawed, as if even rats gave up on chewing through so much bureaucracy. She sets it down with a thud that makes the teacup rattle. This, she says, is where the real story begins. Royal finances. You blink at the cover, unimpressed. That looks like every other dusty book on your desk. Open it. You do, reluctantly. The pages inside are neater than expected. Columns lined up like obedient soldiers, totals scribbled with clinical precision. At first it feels ordinary, but then you notice how the numbers sag, like even ink can look tired. Rows of debts slump across the page, expenses bloating like spoiled fruit. What am I looking at, you ask? Disaster, Myrtle replies flatly. The Crown Prince has been spending as though the treasury were his personal pocket. You skim the entries. Exotic horses, jeweled goblets, banquet after banquet. Whole shipments of silk vanishing into miscellaneous expenses. The numbers tilt into absurdity. He's bankrupting the realm, you whisper. Myrtle snorts. Nearly. Not yet. But if he continues, winter will come and the kingdom will be as empty as this teacup. She rattles the cup for emphasis. You trace one line with your finger. 200 silver for dice? Gambling, Myrtle says grimly. A favorite pastime of royals who think statistics don't apply to them. The receipts in the cabinets stir again, faint whispers leaking through the metal drawers. They sound restless, like gossiping courtiers who've waited too long to spill the scandal. This can't be real, you mutter. One man can't ruin everything. Of course he can. That's the trouble with monarchies. One entitled heir with bad math skills, and suddenly half the kingdom is selling their boots to pay taxes. She flips a few more pages, each worse than the last. Here, this banquet, ostensibly for foreign dignitaries. See the totals? Triple the cost of last year's one. Why? Because he wanted golden plates instead of silver. Waste disguised as diplomacy. You shake your head, struggling to imagine peasants freezing while nobles sip wine from goblets they can't lift without wrist strain. Why hasn't anyone stopped him, you ask? Because ministers prefer their pockets lined. Because no one questions the heir. Because, Myrtle snaps the ledger shut, the only person who could prove it is me. And now, unfortunately for you, you. You freeze. Me? Yes, you. Don't look so shocked. You opened the book, didn't you? The moment you read those numbers, you became part of the equation. That's how it works. That sounds more like a curse than accounting, you mutter. Myrtle smirks. Most curses are just bad budgeting dressed up with sparkles. The cabinets groan in agreement. One drawer slides an inch open, releasing a single slip of paper that flutters down between you like a snowflake. You pick it up. It's a receipt marked in bold ink. Borrowed 1 chest of gold. Reason, for fun. You blink. For fun? His words, not mine, Myrtle says dryly. He didn't even bother with a euphemism. No wonder the ledgers are practically screaming.
Indeed, the slip trembles in your hand, ink pulsing angrily, as though offended by such blatant disrespect. You quickly tuck it back into the ledger. So what happens if the treasury runs dry? Myrtle's face hardens. Bread riots, unpaid soldiers, neighboring kingdoms smelling weakness and circling like wolves. Collapse. The word lands heavy, heavier than any curse you'd feared. Collapse doesn't sound like a single dramatic explosion. Collapse sounds slow, suffocating, unstoppable. You lean back in your chair, trying to breathe. So you're just keeping track? I'm preventing, Myrtle corrects. Barely. I patch holes where I can, I shuffle debts, hide losses, stretch coins thinner than pastry dough. But numbers don't forgive forever. One day, the math wins. The flickering lamplight makes shadows dance across her lined face. For the first time, you notice how tired she looks, how her shoulders sag under invisible weight. She has been holding the kingdom together with pencils and stubbornness. "Can't you tell him?" you ask quietly. "Oh, I've tried. He laughed, said numbers were for clerks, not for princes." Myrtle's lips thin. "He'll learn. Unfortunately, he'll learn by burning everything down around him." The receipts rustle louder, a paper storm building. You press your hands over your ears, but the whispers seep through. Bankrupt, bankrupt, bankrupt. Myrtle slams her pencil on the desk, and the sound cuts the whispers short. "That's enough," she growls at the cabinets, like a teacher silencing unruly children. The silence that follows is even worse. You swallow. "So what do we do?" Her gaze fixes on you, sharp and steady. "We balance. We always balance, even if it means confronting a prince who thinks dice are destiny, even if it means dragging the kingdom through every dirty receipt until he understands." Your mouth goes dry. This isn't the fairy tale you expected. This isn't magic at all. But maybe it's worse. Myrtle pushes the ledger toward you. "Start learning. You'll need to know how to read ruin before you can stop it." Your fingers rest on the cover, reluctant. The book hums faintly under your touch, as though waiting to open its jaws. You realize, with a sinking feeling, that numbers aren't just boring, they're carnivorous. The ledger still hums faintly under your fingertips, when Myrtle rises from her chair. She doesn't bother to explain. She just crosses to a narrow cabinet tucked away in the darkest corner of the room. Unlike the others, this one is carved from black wood, polished so smooth it reflects the lamplight like water. She pulls a key from around her neck and slips it into the lock. "Most laws are written by fools," she mutters, "but these were written by clever fools, the most dangerous kind." The lock clicks, the drawer slides open, and a chill seeps into the room as if someone has just lifted a trapdoor to the night. Myrtle gestures for you to come closer. Inside the drawer are stacks of thin parchment, rolled tightly and bound with red thread. Each scroll glows faintly, the ink pulsing like fireflies. When Myrtle lifts one out and unties it, the script comes alive. Words shimmer in the lamplight, invisible at first and then flaring bright silver, before fading back into faint scratches. "Enchanted tax codes," she explains, "drafted centuries ago. They only reveal themselves under moonlight, though most accountants don't bother waiting that long. But I do." You lean in, fascinated despite yourself. The ink writhes, letters shifting into sentences and then rearranging again, as if reluctant to settle on one truth. "What does it say?" you whisper. Myrtle tilts the page so the lamplight brushes it just right. The words flare silver. "No goat shall be taxed more than once per moon cycle, unless said goat is enchanted or duplicated by sorcery." You blink. That's oddly specific. Every law has a story, Myrtle says. Once upon a time, a duke made a fortune duplicating goats with a wand. The treasury noticed, of course, but instead of outlawing the practice outright, they taxed it. Typical. The letters shift again, glowing faintly green this time. And any pumpkin, transformed for transport, must pay carriage duty unless reverting within 24 hours. You can't help it. You laugh. That's Cinderella, isn't it? More or less, Myrtle says, rolling her eyes. People think fairy tales are sweet. They're just sloppy bookkeeping with better branding. You snort, the sound bouncing oddly in the quiet office. For the first time, the whispers from the cabinets feel less sinister, more like a chorus of tired clerks agreeing with Myrtle. She pulls out another scroll, this one heavier, sealed with wax that hasn't been broken in years. She cracks it open and holds it to the lamplight. The ink flares a deep red, words hissing faintly as though irritated to be disturbed. "What's this one?" you ask. Myrtle's mouth tightens. "On debts owed to the crown, all citizens shall tithe 1/10 of their harvest unless otherwise negotiated by blood oath or magical service." The words seem to throb on the parchment, leaving after-images on your vision. "Blood oath?" you repeat uneasily. "Oh yes, quite binding. Some families are still paying debts their ancestors signed with a prick of the thumb." You shiver, picturing farmers bleeding onto parchment while kings smiled and accountants tallied. Myrtle rolls the scroll shut with a snap. This is why numbers matter. Because hidden inside every fairy tale bargain is a clause, and clauses, she says, tying the red thread tight again, last longer than kingdoms. You reach out to touch the glowing ink on another scroll, but Myrtle smacks your hand lightly with her pencil. "Careful, some of these bite." "Bite?" "One clerk lost a finger to a clause about broom levies. You think I'm joking?" You pull your hand back quickly. "Nope, definitely believe you." Myrtle chuckles, tucking the scrolls neatly back in place. "Good. You're learning. Numbers are sharper than daggers, laws sharper still, and these," she says, locking the drawer with a soft click, "are the sharpest of all." The key disappears back under her collar. She sits again, as calm as if she hadn't just shown you tax codes that glow like live embers. "Why show me this?" you ask. "Because," she replies, "if you're going to survive this kingdom's mess, you need to know the rules. And the rules aren't written in wands or wishes. They're written in clauses that only appear when the moon decides to be generous." You glance at the dark window. A sliver of moon hangs there, pale and sharp. For the first time, you wonder if somewhere out there farmers are nervously counting goats, hoping their taxes don't multiply overnight. The cabinets murmur, receipts shifting uneasily, as if gossiping about clauses overheard. You hug yourself, trying to ignore the sound. Myrtle takes a sip of her tea, now cold, and sighs. "Remember this, child. Spells may expire at midnight, but taxes never do." The receipts rustle in agreement, and the moonlight presses its cold hand against the glass. The moonlight still stains the window silver when a knock rattles the office door. Not a polite tap, but a heavy, booming thud that shakes the cabinets and stirs a flurry of whispering receipts. Myrtle doesn't even look surprised. She sets down her pencil with the weariness of someone who's been waiting for this interruption. "About time," she mutters. Come in." The door creaks open, and in stomps a goblin dressed in a crooked waistcoat and carrying a satchel stuffed to bursting with papers. His skin is the color of tarnished copper, and his ears twitch irritably with every step. He slams the satchel on Myrtle's desk, scattering dust and invoices like confetti. "Missing invoices," he growls, voice gravelly. "Dozens, maybe hundreds. You've got holes the size of kingdoms in your ledgers." Myrtle doesn't flinch. She simply slides her tea aside to make room for the chaos. "Good evening to you too, Crendel." The goblin scowls at you, eyes narrowing. "Who's this? Apprentice? Liability?" You straighten nervously. Relative." Crindle bears a mouthful of sharp, uneven teeth. "Relatives usually make the worst clerks. Too many emotions, not enough spine." "Spine grows with practice," Myrtle says dryly. She begins pulling papers from the satchel, spreading them across the desk. "Now, show me what's missing." Crindle grunts and snatches one of the sheets. "Look here, grain shipments. Supposed to be 20 carts last month. Records show 15. Where are the other 5? You lean over. The numbers shimmer faintly, just like the others you've seen, except these glow with a sickly yellow hue. They look wrong, like bruises on the page. "Stolen?" you guess. "Embezzled," Myrtle corrects. "There's a difference. Stolen is blunt. Embezzle hides in the numbers. Watch." She flips to another ledger and points. "See how the total here balances? That's the trick. They shifted the missing carts into a different column, labeled them as storage fees. Looks fine at a glance, but it's rot underneath." Crindle slams his fist on the desk, rattling the teacup. "Rot that costs goblin merchants half their profit. My guild is ready to riot." "You'd enjoy a riot," Myrtle says calmly. He smirks, unashamed. "Of course, but we'd prefer restitution first." You glance between them, feeling like you've stumbled into a conversation already halfway through. "Wait, if shipments are missing and numbers are being manipulated, doesn't that mean someone in the treasury is—" "Yes, skimming, cooking the books, and doing a sloppy job of it." The cabinets hiss louder, receipts rustling as though they're eager to testify. One slips free and lands at your feet. You pick it up. The handwriting is hurried, almost panicked. 5 carts rerouted, vault credit pending. You pass it to Myrtle. She nods grimly. Confirmation. Someone's moving assets off the books. Crindle's ears twitch again, his voice dropping to a growl. "Names. We need names." "Not yet. Patterns first, then suspects. You can't accuse a prince without proof." At the word prince, the goblin's grin turns vicious. "Oh, I'd love nothing more than to drag a royal brat into court." You shift uncomfortably. "Couldn't it be someone else? A clerk? A minister?" "Maybe, but clerks don't usually gamble away entire shipments of grain." Crindle barks a laugh. "Ah, the dice. Always the dice. Nobles can't resist rolling their fortunes away." The satchel still bulges with papers. Myrtle pulls more free, her eyes scanning faster than you can follow. She mutters under her breath, numbers spilling from her lips like incantations. The glow of the ink reflects in her glasses, making her look briefly otherworldly. You whisper, "Is this magic?" Grindel snorts. "If you think arithmetic is magic, then yes, a very dull magic." Myrtle smacks the papers into a neat stack. "Arithmetic is survival, and right now someone is trying very hard to make sure we don't survive the winter." She pushes the stack toward you. "Your turn. Find the inconsistency." Your stomach drops. "What? Now." You scan the columns, numbers blurring, your pulse hammers. Then you see it, a column labeled maintenance. The totals look neat, too neat, every number rounded perfectly. Your gut twists. This one. Nobody spends exactly 10 silver every week. That's impossible. Myrtle's lips curve into a rare smile. Good. Very good. They're laundering through fake maintenance costs. Crindle claps his clawed hands together. So we expose them. Not yet, Myrtle says again, though her eyes are sharp. We gather more. Enough that even the court can't laugh it off. Crindle groans, but doesn't argue. Instead, he begins stuffing the remaining invoices back into his satchel. Fine, but my guild won't wait forever. If the numbers don't balance soon, we balance them our way. His grin is all teeth, and you don't doubt he means violence. Myrtle waves him off. Go, I'll handle it. The goblin stomps toward the door, muttering about overdue payments and humans who think goblins can't count. The door slams behind him, leaving the office shuddering in silence. You exhale shakily. He's intense. He's an auditor. They're all intense. Comes with the job. The receipts finally quiet, though a few still twitch in their drawers like restless dogs. You sit back, heart pounding. You wanted fairy godmother magic. Instead, you got a goblin with a satchel full of missing invoices, and somehow that feels more terrifying than any spell.
The office feels smaller after Crindle leaves, as if the walls have leaned in to hear whatever comes next. Myrtle doesn't move right away. She sits still, staring at the stack of suspicious invoices with a grim focus that makes your skin prickle. The lamplight flickers across her glasses, hiding her eyes. Finally, she sighs and pushes the papers toward you. Read them again, slowly this time. Look for what doesn't want to be found. You obey, though every number blurs and swims. Grain shipments, maintenance costs, tariffs for ferry crossings. They look ordinary until there, at the bottom of one page, is a notation in smaller script, Account 47B. You frown. What's 47B, you ask. Myrtle sits up straighter. Show me. You point, her lips pressed tight. That, she says, isn't supposed to exist anymore. The words chill you more than the whispering receipts ever did. She pulls another ledger, flips through with brisk fingers, and stops at a page filled with crossouts and thick black ink. At the very bottom, almost hidden, 47B, closed. So why is it here, you ask? That, Myrtle says, is the right question. The receipts in the cabinets begin to murmur again, more insistent this time. You swear you hear them repeating the phrase 47B in papery voices. You swallow. Is it embezzlement? Worse, Myrtle replies. It's a hidden account. Someone reopened it quietly, probably funneling money where no one else looks, and whoever did it has access to royal ledgers. Your skin prickles. You mean a minister or the prince himself, she finishes. The words hang heavy in the room. You glance back at the whisperin' cabinets. They sound less like gossip now and more like warning. Myrtle takes off her glasses, rubs her eyes. I thought I buried that account years ago. It was supposed to die with the last treasurer, but someone dug it up. You lean closer. What kind of account was it? She hesitates, then answers, a slush fund, used for things the Crown didn't want on record, payoffs, bribes, secret contracts. Nothing good ever touched 47B. The ink glows faintly green on the page. You whisper,
So whoever's using it now is either reckless, desperate, or both, Myrtle says. The cabinets rattle louder, receipts shuffling violently. One slips free and lands face up on the desk. The handwriting is sharp, deliberate. Deposit to 47B. 1 dragon's tooth, value uncertain. You stare. A dragon's tooth? Myrtle frowns, scanning the words. Collateral. That means someone is borrowing against it. The idea of mortgaging body parts from dragons makes your stomach twist. That's insane. Insane is cheaper than interest, Myrtle mutters. You glance toward the locked black cabinet, the one holding enchanted tax codes. Doesn't the law cover this? Technically, but loopholes are what keep kingdoms alive and dying. The receipts rustle again, voices rising in a hiss that sounds almost like laughter. You shove the rogue paper back into the drawer, but the damage is done. The whispers cling to your ears. 47B, 47B. Myrtle's face has gone pale. She snaps the ledger shut, locking it with a brass clasp. That's enough for tonight. But no buts. She stands, towering over the desk despite her stooped shoulders. Hidden accounts are like sinkholes. Stare too long and they pull you under. You sit frozen, the numbers still glowing in your mind. So what do we do? Myrtle glances at the door, then back at you. We keep digging, quietly, and we pray whoever's behind it doesn't notice us balancing their books before they balance us. The way she says it sends a shiver crawling down your spine. You try to joke, your voice thin. Balancing people's sounds violent for accountants. Myrtle smirks faintly. Numbers aren't violent, but the people who fear them are. The cabinets fall silent, as if agreeing. You realize the office doesn't feel safer without the whispers. It feels like holding your breath before something snaps.
The silence lingers after Myrtle's warning, broken only by the faint scratching of her pencil as she jots something into her private notebook. You're still trying to shake the echo of that cursed number, 47B, when she suddenly slams the book shut. Enough brooding, she says briskly. The palace ball is tomorrow, and numbers don't reconcile themselves. You blink. Wait, ball? As in gowns, dancing, pumpkin carriages? Myrtle cuts her off with a dry snort. As in ticket sales, banquet invoices, wine shipments, and nobles who think tips are optional. Someone has to make sure it all balances. And guess who that someone is? The answer's obvious, and you groan. Me? Very good. Quick learner. You want to argue, but she's already bustling toward a tall cabinet marked Events. When she opens it, the smell of spilled champagne and singed lace wafts out, as though every party in history has been crammed into folders. She drags out a thick binder that looks more like a tome than a ledger, slamming it on the desk with a puff of confetti that drifts down lazily. Start with ticket stubs, Myrtle instructs, pulling open a drawer. A stack of paper slips bursts free, fluttering around the office like startled birds. Some are crisp, others soggy, and a few hum faintly, glowing faint gold, as if they once doubled as enchantments. You try to catch one mid-air, but it zips just out of reach. Are they alive? Enchanted, she says, not looking up. To prevent counterfeiting, each one has to be tallied manually. Great. You chase the rogue stubs, gathering them into a pile. The whispers from the other cabinets pick up, like giggling servants at a scandal. You slap the stubs on the desk, breathless. Myrtle barely glances. 47 sold, 60 recorded, 37 paid. Tell me what's wrong. Your brain seizes. Wait, that doesn't add up. Exactly. Someone pocketed the difference. She scribbles on her parchment, her face hardening.
Petty theft, yes, but theft nonetheless. Nobles think no one notices because the numbers drown in the banquet bills. But I notice. The receipts rustle, smug as gossiping hens. You flip through more stubs, each glowing faintly, showing mismatched names and amounts. One catches your eye, a ticket scrawled with the prince's seal but marked complimentary. You hand it to Myrtle. Doesn't this mean he didn't pay? She laughs, humorless. The prince never pays. That's half the problem. You want to quip, but another stub slithers free from the pile, wriggling toward the cabinet like it wants to escape. You snatch it up and squint. The handwriting is careful. Too careful. Admit one, charged to 47B. Your stomach drops. Myrtle, you whisper, sliding it across the desk. Her face darkens. She reads the stub, jaw tight. So, they're laundering through event sales too. The cabinets groan like they've overheard scandal worth shouting about. Myrtle silences them with a glare, then looks back at you. Good eye, but keep that one quiet. If anyone knows we saw it, we'll have more than unpaid wine bills to worry about. You shove it into the binder, though the stub squirms against your fingers like it resents being trapped. Myrtle continues scribbling. Tomorrow, when the nobles arrive, I'll be busy balancing speeches and numbers. You, she points her pencil at you like a dagger, will circulate, collect receipts, watch where the gold flows, and don't dance. You blink. What if someone asks? Tell them you're allergic to waltzes. You chuckle despite yourself, though the sound dies quickly in the heavy air. The office seems alive with tension, as though even the ledgers know that tomorrow won't be about just music and gowns. It'll be about numbers with teeth. Myrtle snaps the binder shut, confetti puffing into the lamplight again. Go rest, she orders. Tomorrow you'll learn why balls bankrupt kingdoms faster than wars. You nod, though the thought of rest feels impossible with that cursed stub still glowing in your mind. Admit one, charged to 47B. Somehow, you suspect the ball won't be about dancing at all.
The next morning, Myrtle has you out of bed before the roosters finish their first argument with the dawn. She thrusts a clipboard into your arms, already stacked with parchment. Pixies, she says flatly, and their grievances. We're handling it before the ball tonight. You rub sleep from your eyes. Pixies? Like tiny wings, glitter, that sort of thing? Tiny wings, endless grievances, and a union charter thicker than the Bible. The office door groans open, and in they fly. Dozens of them, buzzing like angry bees, their little faces pinched with exhaustion. Their wings shed sparks that fizzle on the floor, and a few are carrying picket signs made of toothpicks and dried leaves. One sign reads, "Fair pay or no fairy dust." They swarm Myrtle's desk, shouting over one another. The sound is like being trapped inside a jar of jingling coins. "Unpaid overtime," squeaks one, flapping in your face. "Broken quills, no hazard pay for glitter inhalation," shouts another. "Do you know how many wings I singed on faulty lanterns?" a third wails dramatically. Myrtle raises one hand. Instantly, the buzzing dips into tense silence. Enough, one at a time. The pixies grumble but obey, forming a jittery line on the desk. You noticed several clutching parchment slips that glow faintly. They're timesheets, you realize, enchanted to record every minute of their work. Myrtle gestures to the first in line. "Hours?" she asks. The pixie thrusts its slip forward. Myrtle scans it, lips thinning. 87 hours last week. You were paid for 40. The pixie throws its tiny arms up. "Robbery!" Myrtle jots a note. Noted. Next. The second pixie steps forward, wings drooping. "I cataloged 412 ballroom candles, and I haven't seen a single coin." Myrtle flips through the payroll ledger. Listed under volunteer service.
The pixie's shriek rattles the inkwells. "Volunteer!" "They do this," Myrtle says calmly, scribbling. "Label real labor as volunteer. Cuts costs. Illegal, of course." You glance at the buzzing crowd. "This is, a lot." "Welcome to labor disputes," Myrtle replies. "Now help. Tally their slips. We'll reconcile against the Treasury's payroll records." You take the glowing slips nervously, each one humming with indignation. The numbers spill across your clipboard, and you quickly realize Myrtle's right. Dozens of unpaid hours, all smudged into margins, disguised as volunteer. The pixies crowd closer, their wings stirring a storm of glitter that makes you sneeze. Myrtle keeps her pencil moving, unflustered, muttering as she works. Overtime denied. Hazardous dust exposure. Unpaid wing repairs. Finally, one pixie, smaller than the rest, edges forward, its wings afraid, dust clinging to the tips. "I fell off a chandelier while stringing ribbons," it whispers. "They called it negligence. Docked my pay." Myrtle's jaw tightens. She flips open a heavy black volume and reads, "Section 12, Clause 8. Any pixie injured in service shall receive full compensation unless proven intoxicated." She peers down at the tiny worker. "Were you intoxicated?" The pixie shakes her head fiercely. "Just dizzy from glitter fumes." "Compensable," Myrtle says firmly, writing in bold strokes. The pixie's eyes brim with tears. It bows low, wings trembling. As the complaints pile up, you feel the weight of it all. These aren't just numbers. These are lives reduced to unpaid slips. You look at Myrtle, who seems to balance fury and precision with every stroke of her pencil. When the last pixie speaks, Myrtle snaps her ledger shut and says, "We'll bring this before the court. They'll sneer, of course, but numbers louder than wings can't be ignored." The pixies cheer weakly, though most are too tired to muster real joy. They flutter out the window in a trail of fading sparks, their tiny picket signs bobbing like tired flags. You cough, glitter clinging to your lungs. "That was, overwhelming." Myrtle gives you a thin smile. "Better you learn now. Nobles may bleed the treasury dry, but it's always the smallest folk who notice first. Numbers don't lie. People do." The cabinets murmur in agreement, their whispers like a tired applause. The glitter still clings to your sleeves when Myrtle clears her throat. She's already reorganizing her desk, stacking the pixie timesheets neatly beside the goblin invoices and the cursed ticket stubs. "Enough," she says, dusting her hands. "You've seen problems. Now it's time you see how I solve them." You lean closer, wary but curious. "You mean more ledgers?" "Formulas," she corrects, as though the word itself tastes sharper. She pulls a battered notebook from the bottom drawer, a notebook so thick it could double as a doorstop. Its leather cover is cracked, its edges curled, and faint symbols glow along the spine. "This," she says with a touch of reverence, "is my workbook." She opens it. You half expect arcane runes or golden light. Instead, you see grids. Endless grids of numbers, arranged in tidy columns and rows. At first glance, it's the dullest thing you've ever seen. At second glance, it makes your stomach lurch. Because the numbers are moving. They slide and adjust in real time, adding, subtracting, rebalancing themselves like living arithmetic. Whole rows vanish, replaced by subtotals. Columns sprout new figures as if reacting to Myrtle's breathing. You whisper, "That's alive." "It's predictive," Myrtle corrects. "What you call sorcery, I call formulas. Watch." She picks up her pencil, taps the grid. The numbers ripple outward, reorganizing themselves. New figures appear at the bottom, glowing faint green.
Revenue at the ball tonight, she points. If nobles buy wine at last year's rate, the treasury nets 600 gold. If they drink faster, she taps again. The number updates to 400. You blink. It knows? It projects, Myrtle smirks faintly. Give it the right variables, it will predict chaos with terrifying accuracy. She scribbles quickly. The numbers jump again, columns turning red. If the prince places bets during the ball, gold vanishes into 47B. The cursed account pulses faintly on the page, the numbers wobbling as if sick. You shiver. This is dangerous, you murmur. Of course, Myrtle says calmly, any tool worth having is dangerous, but it's mine. And with it, I keep kingdoms from collapsing. The numbers shift again, columns clashing like swords. One projection shows pixies walking out, their unpaid hours cascading into lost productivity, then into food shortages, then into riots. Another projection shows the Goblin Guild closing their markets, which spirals into famine within weeks. Your throat tightens. It's like a crystal ball. Except, Myrtle says, it doesn't lie. Nobles dress their lies in jewels and call it diplomacy. This, she taps the glowing grid, only ever shows the truth. The cabinets whisper uneasily, as though unsettled by truth laid bare. One drawer creaks open, and a stray receipt floats out, landing on the workbook. The formula absorbs it instantly, recalculating. The projection shifts. Tonight's ball now predicts a deficit, not a profit. She snatches the receipt, reads it aloud. 2 extra barrels of imported wine, paid for by 47B. Her eyes narrow, the grid glows red again, figures bleeding across the page like a wound. She says quietly, they're accelerating. Someone wants the treasury drained before anyone notices. You stare at the shifting numbers, your chest tight. So, what do? We prepare, Myrtle replies, closing the workbook with a heavy thud. The glow vanishes, but the after-image of bleeding red numbers burns in your mind. She leans back, suddenly looking older, as though every formula weighs on her shoulders. Tonight, at the ball, you'll fetch receipts. I'll monitor the flow. And if chaos erupts, we'll already know who lit the match. You try to laugh, but it comes out thin. All this from a spreadsheet? Myrtle gives a small, wry smile. Call it sorcery if you like. I just call it math. The cabinets murmur, not in protest this time, but in what sounds unnervingly like agreement.
The castle is already humming by the time you arrive that evening, clutching your clipboard like a shield. Nobles in glittering gowns sweep past, their laughter echoing off the stone walls. But Myrtle steers you not toward the ballroom floor, but toward the side tables stacked with receipts, invoices, and open purses. Watch the money, she instructs, pressing her spectacles higher on the nose. Not the jewels. The jewels are distractions. You nod, heart racing. The ballroom itself is breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers, silk banners, a quartet of enchanted violins playing by themselves, but you barely have time to admire it before Myrtle thrusts you into motion. Collect stubs, record wine purchases, and whatever you do, don't let anyone talk you into dancing. You weave between the nobles, trying to look invisible. Their laughter smells of expensive perfume and too much wine. One duchess slaps a gold coin on the table, then winks at you. Put it on the crown's tab, darling. You scribble it down, pulse quickening. Already the numbers feel slippery. Across the room, Myrtle is stationed like a sentinel beside a buffet table, jotting furiously in her notebook every time a servant wheels out another tray. She catches your eye once, gives a sharp nod, then turns back to her work.
You're just tallying a cluster of champagne flutes when a familiar voice cuts through the noise. New clerk, are you? You look up and freeze. The prince himself leans casually against the table, a goblet in hand, his smile too polished to be sincere. He's younger than you expected, with curls spilling over his brow and eyes that sparkle with something sharper than charm. Yes, sir, you stammer. Good, then you'll run this down for me. He flicks a folded slip of parchment your way. You catch it clumsily. The ink glows faintly, an enchanted IOU. You unfold it and feel your stomach drop. It's not a receipt for wine or tickets. It's a gambling note. 10 carts of grain wagered on dice. You whisper, grain? That's treasury property. The prince just grins. Not if the dice favor me. You clutch the slip tighter. And if they don't? Then the kingdom pays, he says cheerfully and drains his goblet. Your throat goes dry. This isn't petty theft. This is the kingdom itself bleeding gold at the prince's table. He notices your silence and laughs. Relax. Everyone plays. Some of us just play bigger. He leans closer, lowering his voice. Besides, there's always a count 47B if things get complicated. The cursed number slithers down your spine like ice water. You choke out. You know about 47B? Of course, he says, smirking. My private purse, very discreet. Don't worry, clerk. You'll learn not to ask questions. With that, he straightens, tosses you a coin like a tip, and disappears into the crowd. You stand frozen, staring at the glowing slip. Myrtle was right. The missing grain, the embezzlement, the cursed account, it all leads here. Your clipboard shakes in your hands. If the prince keeps gambling like this, there won't be enough left to feed the kingdom through winter. Across the room, Myrtle's eyes find you. She doesn't need words to ask what you've seen. The answer is already burning in your palm. The goblet-stained receipt still burns in your palm when Myrtle beckons sharply from across the ballroom. You weave through silk gowns and jeweled capes, the violins trilling overhead, until you reach her post at the buffet table. She doesn't speak, just holds out her hand. You slide the gambling note into her palm. The moment she reads it, her jaw locks tight. Grain, she mutters. The idiot wagered grain. You whisper back. He said account 47B would cover it. Myrtle's eyes flash. Of course he did. He's not even hiding anymore. The chandeliers above flicker as if the kingdom itself shivers at her words. Myrtle snaps her notebook shut. We can't wait for the court. If this debt stands overnight, the treasury collapses by dawn. We fix it now. She grabs your sleeve, dragging you out of the ballroom and into the quieter corridors. The music fades, replaced by the echo of your footsteps. Myrtle's grip is fierce for someone her age, her pace brisk. Where are we going? You ask breathlessly. To the workroom. Midnight recalculations. The palace corridors are colder, lined with portraits of kings who look smug and well-fed. Myrtle ignores them all, leading you into a chamber stuffed with quills, ink pots, and half-burned candles. A single ledger waits on the central desk, the master account. She lights a candle, the flame sputtering before catching. Shadows leap across the walls. Sit, she orders. You drop into the chair, staring at the enormous ledger. Its leather cover hums faintly, as if aware of your fear. Myrtle sets the gambling note beside it. Every debt the prince writes shifts the balance. If we don't counter it, the ledger will roll into deficit before morning. You swallow hard. How do we counter it? She pulls out her battered workbook, the one with shifting formulas, and flips it open beside the master account. By juggling, we reassign, redistribute, disguise. It won't erase the debt, but it'll keep the kingdom from choking on it until we expose him. The numbers on the page flicker like fireflies, rearranging themselves as Myrtle scribbles variables. Under her breath, she mutters, grain, wine, pixie payroll, goblin tariffs. You watch the columns realign, glowing faint green before wobbling dangerously red again. The candlelight makes it look like the figures are bleeding. Your chest tightens. It's not working, you snap, because you're just watching. She thrusts the quill into your hand. Help me! Move something, anything. Your hand trembles, but you scratch a number into the margin. The ledger shudders, columns twisting, then settle briefly into balance before slipping again. Good, Myrtle says quickly. Keep going. Don't stop. Think of it like spinning plates. Your quill scratches faster, numbers flying, your mind racing to find every loophole, uncollected tithes, overpaid tariffs, hidden surplus from candle inventories. Each adjustment steadies the columns for a heartbeat before another wavers dangerously red. It feels like fighting a hydra. Cut off one deficit, two more appear. The candle gutters. Shadows twitch across the walls like claws. The ledger hums louder, as if alive, hungry for mistakes. Your quill slips. A column plunges red. The projection flashes. Famine within 3 months. Panic seizes you. I can't, she barks. Yes, you can. Numbers bend if you bend with them. Don't fight the flow, redirect it. Her words snap something loose in you. You stop thinking of the numbers as rigid walls and start seeing them as water, rushing, colliding. You shift one here, divert another there, and suddenly the red columns shrink. The ledger steadies. Both of you work in silence, breathless, until the final number settles into pale green. The hum fades. You sunk back, sweating. Did we do it? Myrtle scans the balance, then nods slowly. We bought time, nothing more. The candle is almost gone, wax pooling across the desk. Beyond the walls, the music has faded into the stillness of night. Myrtle closes the workbook gently, like tucking in a restless child. By dawn, the accounts will hold, but tomorrow, her eyes glint behind her glasses, we sharpen our case, because sooner or later, numbers sharper than daggers have to draw blood. The flame sputters. Darkness presses closer. You swear the ledger sighs with relief.
The dawn, after your midnight battle with numbers, feels like a false reprieve. The palace is quieter now, servants scrubbing away spilled wine and candle wax, nobles snoring in their feathered chambers. But Myrtle doesn't let you rest. She's already dressed in her plain gray suit, spectacles gleaming as she hauls the master account under one arm. Court convenes, she says grimly. Bring your clipboard. Your stomach lurches. We're presenting? We're surviving, she corrects. The royal courtroom is nothing like the ballroom. No chandeliers, no violins, just a high-vaulted chamber where nobles sit in carved benches, their robes glinting like crow's feathers. At the front, the king slouches on his throne, heavy-lidded, while ministers cluster with smug expressions and neatly powdered wigs. You feel small as Myrtle strides to the center, placing the master account on the table like a weapon. The murmurs ripple instantly. Again with her numbers, sneers one duke, voice dripping with contempt. Can't she keep her columns to herself? Myrtle ignores him. She opens the ledger, pages glowing faintly under the courtroom skylight. Your Grace, she begins, voice sharp but steady. The kingdom stands on the edge of deficit. Grain shipments diverted, pixie labor unpaid, goblin markets cheated, and now, she slaps down the cursed gambling note, grain wagered by your son. The room erupts in laughter. Ministers chuckle, nobles whisper behind jeweled fans. One baron scoffs, dice and ledgers, shall we put her sums on trial too? The king raises a lazy eyebrow, uninterested. Myrtle doesn't flinch. She flips to her workbook, tapping the formulas. Instantly the columns shimmer and project upward, glowing like spectral graphs in the air. Red cascades across the room, a bleeding map of deficit. Gasps ripple among the crowd. Numbers don't lie, she says coldly. Ignore them and you'll starve by spring.
The Duke, who mocked her earlier, leans forward, sneering. Or perhaps the numbers were arranged to frighten us. Who's to say your formulas are not simply sorcery? Myrtle's smile is razor thin. Sorcery vanishes at midnight. These balances last forever. You hold your breath as she flicks her pencil, the glowing graph reshaping into projections, famine, riots, collapsed trade routes. The ministers blanch, the color draining from their powdered faces. The prince, lounging in his seat near the king, laughs carelessly. Doom and gloom, she makes it sound as if one little wager could topple a kingdom. Myrtle doesn't look at him. She simply taps the projection again. Red lines streak directly to account 47B. The cursed number pulses across the air, impossible to ignore. The murmurs shift from mockery to unease. Nobles glance at one another, faces pale. The king frowns for the first time. Account 47B. That was closed, supposedly, but reopened under your son's seal. All eyes snap to the prince. He tries to grin it off, but the air has changed. The nobles are no longer laughing. They smell blood in the water. A minister sputters. Surely this is miscalculation. Myrtle slams the ledger shut. The sound is louder than any gavel. Miscalculation doesn't glow red, minister. Embezzlement does. The whispers rise, spreading through the chamber like fire. The prince shifts in his chair, jaw tight. The king's gaze sharpens, heavy as a blade. Myrtle gathers her papers calmly. Balance your ledgers, my lords, or the kingdom will balance them for you. For a long moment, no one breathes. Then the courtroom erupts into shouts, accusations, denials, the sound of nobles panicking under the weight of numbers sharper than daggers.
The courtroom chaos spills long after Myrtle's ledger slam, but by midday, the ministers break into hushed conferences, desperate to patch reputations. Myrtle pulls you aside, down a quieter corridor lined with faded banners of past conquests. "We rattled them," she mutters, clutching her workbook. "Now we strike." "Strike with what?" you whisper, still shaken by the noble shouting. She stops before a heavy oak door marked Treasury Collateral Vault. Its iron lock hums faintly with protective runes. Every loan needs collateral. Every debt leaves a trail. The prince's gambling note is covered, barely, but the collateral he pledged is, unusual. You swallow. Unusual how? Myrtle produces a brass key from her pocket, slides it into the lock, and the door groans open. Inside, the vault smells of dust and dragon fire. Piles of ingots glimmer faintly, crates labeled in neat handwriting, scrolls tied with red string. At the far end, a mountain of coins gleams like liquid sunlight. But this hoard isn't human. The air trembles with a faint growl. Your knees nearly buckle. "That's a dragon's collateral," Myrtle confirms. "Seized generations ago for unpaid tribute, bound by contract to remain until debt is cleared." The dragon's hoard shifts slightly, as though exhaling. A single golden eye blinks open within the pile. You stumble back, heart hammering. The dragon's voice rumbles through the vault without moving its mouth. "Accountants, again." Myrtle bows stiffly. "Your collateral has been pledged to cover the prince's debt." The eye narrows. "Debt on dice, insolence." The air smells suddenly of scorched parchment. You grip your clipboard tighter. "If he loses, your hoard is forfeit," the dragon growls. "I do not lose." Its laughter rumbles like shifting mountains. Myrtle steps closer, unshaken. "The contract says otherwise. Wager or not, the pledge binds the collateral." The dragon's head rises fully now, coins cascading off its scales. Its horns scrape the ceiling. Heat presses against your skin. You glance at Myrtle, panic rising. We can't let him use this. He'll destroy everything. Her voice is cold steel, which is why we seize the collateral before it's lost. Your mouth goes dry. You want to repossess a dragon's hoard? Myrtle adjusts her spectacles. Technically, yes, it's overdue interest. The dragon's roar shakes dust from the ceiling. Interest? It bellows. Fire licks between its teeth. Your prince owes me nothing but apology. Myrtle opens the ledger calmly, pages glowing. On the contrary, Clause 12, interest accrues when pledged hoards are left idle. By my calculation, you owe us storage fees, unless you'd like to pay in kind. The dragon glares down at her, smoke curling from its nostrils. Then, to your shock, it huffs a laugh, low, dangerous, but amused. Ha 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 ha! You are bold, little accountant. Very well, take your interest. It dips a claw into the pile, flicking aside a handful of coins that crash at your feet like thunder. But know this, should the prince's foolishness burn my hoard, I burn your kingdom. The vault trembles with the finality of its words. Myrtle snaps her ledger shut. Duly noted. She looks at you. Collect the receipts. You crouch, trembling, and gather the dragon's coins into your pouch, each one hot as a coal. The dragon's golden eye follows your every move. When you leave the vault, Myrtle exhales sharply, as though she's been holding her breath the whole time. That should hold the treasury a little longer. You're too stunned to speak. Behind you, the dragon shifts back into its hoard, coins clattering like rainfall, its laughter echoing long after the vault door slams shut. The next evening, the grand ballroom is scrubbed spotless again, as though the chaos of debts and court arguments never happened. Chandeliers blaze brighter than ever. Tables groan under heaps of sugared fruits, and nobles sweep in wearing fresh gowns with smugly reset smiles. But for you, there's no glamour left, only receipts. Myrtle shoves a stack of parchment into your hands. Tonight, you track every coin, every tip, every jewel pawned for champagne. I thought this was supposed to be a celebration, you mutter, eyeing the nobles twirling across the marble floor. Celebration, Myrtle snorts. It's creative accounting in satin. You slip into the tide of dancers, clipboard ready. A lord staggers past, pressing a half-melted candlestick into your hand. Payment for the orchestra, he slurs, before spinning away with a shrieking partner. You jot it down, sighing. Everywhere you look, nobles are carelessly tossing coins, bartering jewels, scribbling promises on enchanted napkins. It's like trying to herd cats with pockets full of gold. You scribble furiously. 3 rubies pledged for peacock feathers, 4 silvers exchanged for champagne refills, 20 copper lost to spilled dice. One particularly tipsy countess grabs your arm mid-spin. Clerk, record this, 5 ducats to whoever keeps my husband from dancing again. She collapses into giggles and twirls off. You rub your temples. This is chaos. Myrtle, stationed near the musicians, yells back, "Write faster!" Halfway through, the prince makes his entrance. He's flushed, grinning, clearly already drunk, and trailed by hangers-on. He tosses dice onto a table, nobles rushing to join. You flinch, clutching your clipboard tighter. He winks at you across the room, then deliberately scrawls another glowing IOU. Grain again, always grain. Your quill scratches harder, the column of deficits growing longer with each flick of his dice. You're drowning in figures when Myrtle suddenly appears at your elbow, her expression flinty. "Dance," she says. You blink. "What?"
Dance with the ledgers. If you chase after every coin, you'll collapse. Let them spend. You move with the flow. Balance later. And then she does something you never thought possible. Myrtle herself steps onto the dance floor, notebook in hand, gliding stiffly among the nobles. She turns, twirls, jots a figure, all without spilling her ink. It's ridiculous, and yet effective. You find yourself doing the same. A baroness spins you into a waltz. You record her pearl pledge with one hand, step back with the other. A knight bows theatrically, handing you a gemstone. You pivot, tally, return to the rhythm. It's absurd bookkeeping is ballet, but somehow it works. The columns stop slipping into chaos, settling instead into patterns you can almost predict. The prince notices you dancing and laughs mockingly, raising his goblet, to the clerk who thinks numbers can dance. Myrtle twirls past, dry as parchment, better than a prince who gambles kingdoms. The crowd hushes for a breath, then erupts into nervous laughter, unsure which side to take. The music swells louder, covering the tension. You keep moving, scribbling, turning, the ledgers alive in your hands. For one strange moment, you actually feel lighter, like the numbers aren't just crushing weights, but steps in a rhythm only you and Myrtle hear. The night ends with nobles collapsing in heaps of silk and jewels, their debts scattered across your clipboard like confetti. You stagger back to Myrtle's side, breathless. She adjusts her spectacles, nodding once. Not perfect, but we kept the floor from collapsing. You almost laugh. Barely. And together, you haul the mess of receipts off the dance floor, leaving behind only the echo of waltzes and debts hanging in the air.
The ballroom stench of spilled wine still clings to your clothes the next morning, but Myrtle is already striding ahead, spectacles glinting in the gray light. "We need proof," she mutters. "Receipts don't lie, but nobles claim they do. So we find the originals." You follow her down a spiral stairwell that winds deeper and deeper beneath the palace. The air grows damp, cool, carrying the smell of mildew and wet stone. Your footsteps echo like unwanted confessions. At the bottom, 2 guards yawn beside an iron gate. They barely glance at Myrtle before letting her through. Apparently, accountants don't look dangerous. Beyond lies the dungeons, though these cells don't hold prisoners. They hold paper. Rows of shelves stretch into the gloom, sagging under the weight of parchment scrolls, ledgers bound in cracked leather, sacks of coins tied shut centuries ago. Wax seals dangle like dead wasps. The whole place hums faintly, as if the records themselves whisper at one another in the dark. Myrtle lights a lantern. Its glow spills over the shelves, casting jittery shadows. Every deal, every theft, every bribe, archived down here. Some pages are cursed to scream if torn, others to rot fingers that touch them without permission, so be careful. "Careful how?" you ask nervously, trailing behind her. "Don't be stupid," she says briskly. You pass a row where receipts flutter softly, as if sighing. Another where ledgers groan under invisible weight, pages flipping by themselves. Your skin prickles. This place doesn't feel abandoned. It feels hungry. Myrtle stops before a massive chest, chained shut with iron. She rests her palm on it, whispering a formula. The chains slither free, clattering onto the floor. Inside, piles of parchment, stained with ink so dark it glows faintly blue. The cursed accounts. You lean closer, lantern trembling in your hand. At the top lies one receipt, marked in crimson wax. Account 47B, transfer approved.
Your breath catches. This is it, the proof of the prince's embezzlement. But as you reach for it, the parchment shivers. The ink writhes like a nest of worms, letters twisting into shapes that hiss in your ears. You yank your hand back. It's alive. Not alive, Myrtle corrects, though her voice is tight. Enchanted, designed to resist exposure. The ink keeps slithering, forming new words. Do not read. You whisper, "What if it screams?" "Then let it," Myrtle says firmly, pulling on her gloves. She grips the receipt, holding it steady as the letters lash out, spitting sparks. Documented quickly. You fumble with your clipboard, scribbling furiously, even as the parchment shrieks in the high, metallic voice that rattles the dungeon walls. Guards above shout in alarm. The shelves around you stir, scrolls rattle, ledgers thump, receipts tear themselves in half. The archives are waking. "Faster," Myrtle hisses. "Write every digit." The cursed receipt writhes like a caught eel, but you manage to record its numbers, its seal, its damning signature, the prince's hand. The shrieking cuts off abruptly. The parchment goes limp in Myrtle's grip, edges curling like a dead leaf. She tucks it into the satchel with grim efficiency. You stand there, gasping, ears ringing, surrounded by the groaning shelves. For a moment, it feels like the whole dungeon is glaring at you. Then Myrtle blows out the lantern. "We have what we came for. Now move before the records decide to file us." You don't argue. You stumble after her, clutching your clipboard, as the whispers follow you all the way up the spiral stairs.
By the time you and Myrtle emerge from the dungeon, the satchel heavy with cursed receipts, the entire palace buzzes with anticipation. Word has spread. An open tribunal, called by the ministers themselves to determine whether Myrtle's accusations are true or mere meddling. The chamber is even more crowded than before. Nobles pack the benches, courtiers whisper behind feathered fans, and the prince lounges smugly at the front, goblet in hand. The king sits stonily on his throne, his gaze unreadable. Myrtle doesn't hesitate. She marches to the center, lays the cursed receipt on the table, and opens her workbook. The parchment twitches faintly, as though resenting daylight. "This," she announces, voice ringing through the chamber, "is proof. A transfer from account 47B, signed by His Highness, diverting grain reserves to cover gambling debt." Gasps ripple. The prince waves a lazy hand. Forgery, old parchment, and an overactive imagination. Myrtle smiles thinly. "Then let's put the imagination to numbers." She taps her pencil to her workbook. Columns rise in the air again, shimmering projections of deficits and balances. But this time, she doesn't just show them, she wields them. Bars slam down like iron gates, unpaid pixie wages. Curved lines strike like whips, goblin tariffs dodged. Pie charts slice through the air like spinning blades. Each figure highlights a lie, a theft, a siphoned account. The ministers flinch as the graphs swing past, sharp as physical weapons. One duck's powdered wig is sliced neatly in half by a glowing bar. You grip your clipboard tightly, scribbling notes to steady yourself. The prince scoffs louder, but his voice cracks. "Parlor tricks. None of this proves—" She slaps down the cursed receipt. Instantly, the ink writhes, hissing again. The ministers recoil. The glowing numbers converge around it, aligning, undeniable. "The signature is his," Myrtle says, her tone flat as iron. "The debt is his. The collapse will be yours if you let him walk." The prince leaps to his feet, red, shouting, "Lies! She twists figures like spells. She's the real thief." The king finally stirs, lifting a hand. The chamber quiets. His voice is low, heavy. "Then prove otherwise, my son. Open your accounts." A silence falls, so complete you can hear parchment flutter. The prince's jaw works, but no words come. His goblet trembles slightly in his grip. Myrtle seizes the moment. She drives her pencil down one last time. A massive balance sheet unfolds across the chamber, stretching wall to wall. Every number from every ledger aligns into one brutal truth. The kingdom bleeds because the prince gambles. The nobles whisper fiercely now, no longer laughing. Ministers pale. The weight of numbers hangs heavy, sharp, undeniable. Myrtle steps back, spectacles glinting. This is not sorcery. This is accounting, and it damns him more surely than any curse. The chamber trembles with the force of silence. For the first time, the prince looks small. The tribunal ends in a roar of voices, but when the echoes finally fade, Myrtle has what she wanted. The numbers lodged in every noble's mind like a splinter they cannot ignore. By the time you leave the chamber, the prince is pale and tight-lipped, his swagger curdled into silence. But Myrtle doesn't slow down. She marches you straight to the treasury, the cursed receipt still twitching in her satchel. They'll argue for weeks, she says briskly. We don't have weeks. We settle the accounts now, before the whole realm tips into insolvency. The master account waits under its shroud of dust and candle wax. You open it together, and once again the columns blaze upward. Only now the red is everywhere. Pixie wages overdue, goblin tariffs stiffed, the dragon's collateral pledged 3 times over. The prince's debts layered like rotten shingles. Your stomach flips. It's worse. It's final, Myrtle says. Her pencil races, carving new paths. You dive in beside her, quill flying, heart hammering. You shuffle coin from dragon interest to cover pixie payroll, reassign tariffs to buy grain, redirect noble taxes into emergency stores. Every adjustment steadies one column, but topples another. At last, with sweat dripping into your eyes, you and Myrtle find a precarious equilibrium. The final projection glows faint green. Solvency. Just barely. You slump in your chair. We saved it. Not without cost, Myrtle murmurs. She points to the losses still glowing faintly red. The royal treasury nearly empty. The dragon's hoard irreparably diminished. Noble fortunes clipped. The kingdom lives, but limps. The master account hums softly, as if exhaling after a long fever. Above, bells ring. Nobles file out of the tribunal chamber, muttering. You know the gossip will spread. How Myrtle cornered the prince with nothing but figures. How the kingdom teetered and steadied in one night. But Myrtle doesn't bask. She shuts the ledger, her face unreadable. Numbers don't care about glory. They care about balance. And balance always demands payment. You sit back, exhausted. For the first time in weeks, the kingdom won't starve. But the image of red columns and empty accounts sticks to the back of your eyes. The price of solvency is steep, and it's only beginning.
The palace corridors are hushed after the tribunal, the marble echoing with whispers instead of music. Myrtle leads you not to the treasury this time, but to her small office, cluttered with dusty ledgers and chipped teacups. She shuts the door, bolts it, and sits heavily at her desk. For the first time, she looks tired. You hover uncertainly. We won, didn't we? Her laugh is brittle. Wins in numbers aren't victories. They're postponements. She folds her hands atop the satchel, still holding the cursed receipt. But you deserve to know why I chose columns over charms. You blink. You mean you really could have been a proper fairy godmother, with wands and spells? Myrtle adjusts her spectacles. Once. I had the gift. Sparkles, transformations, all of it. I could have conjured you a pumpkin carriage as easily as I balance a sheet. She pauses. But magic is fickle. Accounting is forever. You lean closer, whispering, "What happened?" Her gaze drifts to the window, where dawn leaks gray light across the stone. I watched kingdoms rise and fall because their sorcerers dazzled while their ledgers rotted. A wand makes a gown, A spreadsheet feeds a city. I chose the discipline that doesn't lie. Silence hums between you, broken only by the scratching of mice in the walls. Finally, you ask, "And the prince?" Her mouth hardens. He gambles because he believes the kingdom is enchanted, that no matter how reckless he is, someone else will wave a wand and fix it. He doesn't understand that numbers don't forgive. You study her lined face, the weariness beneath her sharp eyes. For the first time, you realize how much she's carried, every column, every deficit, every burden of proof. Slowly, Myrtle opens a drawer and pulls out a slim wand. Its wood is cracked, dull, forgotten. She lays it beside the ledger. "This was mine. I kept it, once, to remind me of the path I left behind. But I never used it again." You stare at the wand, then at her. "Do you regret it?" Her hand hovers over the wood, then pulls back. Regret is a luxury. Balance leaves no room for nostalgia. But sometimes, her voice softens, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd waived this instead of signing my first audit. The dawn grows brighter, painting her office gold. Myrtle pushes the wand aside and picks up her pencil again. Enough sentiment. The kingdom isn't safe yet, and until it is, numbers will be sharper than any spell. The sun rises softer than it has in weeks, spilling through the palace windows in long gold ribbons. You sit at Myrtle's desk, the final ledger open before you. The columns are balanced, precarious, yes, but steady. The cursed receipt lies tucked away, its ink quiet at last. Myrtle stands beside you, spectacles low on her nose, watching as you write the last figure. The quill scratches to a stop. The page gleams faintly green, then fades into stillness. "That's it," you murmur. "The accounts are closed." Myrtle nods once, slow. She doesn't clap or cheer. Numbers don't inspire celebration. She just places her hand gently on the book's cover and shuts it with a sigh that feels older than the kingdom itself. Outside, the bells toll, but this time they're not frantic. They're steady, measured, like heartbeats. The nobles will argue, the prince will seethe, the dragon will brood over its diminished horde, but for now, the kingdom breathes. You rise from the desk, shoulders aching, and carry the heavy ledger to its shelf. It slides into place among hundreds of others, indistinguishable except for those who know the story it holds. Myrtle lingers in the doorway, watching the sunlight pool across the floor. Every kingdom ends, one way or another. But today, ours continues. You nod. The numbers hum faintly behind the shelf, quiet as sleeping beasts. Myrtle straightens, adjusts her spectacles, and finally allows herself the ghost of a smile. Close the office, clerk. Tomorrow we audit again. The morning stretches calm and unhurried. You leave the room together, the scent of ink and candle wax trailing behind, the soft ledger closed forever in your hands. The wind down comes slow, gentle, unhurried. The sharp lines of columns soften into hazy smudges. The frantic scribbles of your quill dissolve into stillness. No rushing, no clattering coins, no murmurs of panicked nobles. Just paper, quiet and flat, folded neatly away. You can almost hear the numbers settling like dust motes, drifting harmlessly in the pale morning light. The dragon's laughter fades, the prince's deaths dissolve into silence, and the endless scratching of Myrtle's pencil slows, then stills. Breathe in, and the ink no longer burns. Breathe out, and the ledgers close, one after another, their spines lined up in orderly peace. The kingdom does not vanish. It does not thrive. It simply rests, balanced, carried into another day. The last candle guttered out hours ago, and yet the dawn feels softer, warmer, a promise that nothing urgent waits in the margins, only quiet, only rest. The final book tucks itself away, spine snug against its neighbors, and the shelves breathe out a hush. Myrtle's office is empty now, her chair pushed neatly beneath the desk, her spectacles folded and waiting. And you, at last, step back from the ledger. The ink no longer whispers, the numbers no longer bite. They are only marks on a page, and they are finished. Close your eyes, let the light fade, and sleep easy now. The kingdom is balanced, and the story is done. Sweet dreams.